Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and this is the Monday morning meta report for 16.3 week 1. The patch has been out since Thursday, and yeah, so it's time to do a Monday morning meta report. I'm here at the Riot office recording it. Sweet. So sorry if the audio is not my usual quality here. Usual disclaimers, these reports are based on early experiences, internal data, things can change before any patches are determined. Anything included in this report does not mean it'll be acted on immediately, and data only tells us what is, not what can be. Meta shifts and new discoveries can happen at any moment. All right, so let's talk about this patch. This patch had a lot of buffs, a lot of reworks, and things like that, and where did it end up? Well, ASOL, that's where it ended up. All right, this has been the Monday Morning Meta Report. No, just kidding. No, but ASOL's rework, I think, shows that the team, we tried to make him more interesting, be able to itemize better, and we were successful. But it also shows what happens when you can be off by just a little bit, right? Like, whether it be the mana cost or the damage in particular, but this guy ended up a bit too strong. It's interesting, if you look at the data for him, it actually goes down the higher elo you get. But certainly at lower elos right now, if you know how to force him, if you know how to do sort of the degenerate roll downs on 7, once you have like a Leona and things like that, he can be really, really warping. And his spell shape right now, with how frequent he's showing up, is blocking out a lot of things. So yeah, Aurelion Sol kind of warping the meta around him right now. The fact that like basically any good melee champion, for example, Ambessa, Warwick, things like that, really just can't deal with that because they just get ulted by the Aurelion Soul. Things like the Nasher buff also, for example, kind of shifted them. The fact that everyone's running Nashers, JG probably isn't the healthiest thing. So I will say right now the current plan is to B patch his mana cost a little bit, so that will slow him down, lower his ability to stack. We want this to be the kind of champion that if you get early or find the right position, you should be able to play, but not something you should force it. So again, we're not going to look to like nuke him from orbit or anything, but it is clear that he is warping things a bit too much. Now, if you take Aurelion Sol out of the meta, I think below that what you see is, Kaisa, Yunara, Demacia all doing pretty well. Below that, you can see some like Lissandra variants, Seraphine. We're also seeing some new stuff crop up. Orianna reroll, kind of the talk of the town right now. That's been pretty strong. So I think once Aurelion Sol gets kind of put into place, really it's going to be about the gap, between Kaisa, Yunara, and the other things. Can stuff like Misfortune or Lissandra succeed? Do we need to look at Bilgewater some more? How's Bilgewater playing out? I know Bilgewater really suffered from the Fizz nerf in particular, so that's really put it in kind of a rough spot. So yeah, and then beyond that, there are a couple other champions that are below the mark. Things like Aatrox and Mel are kind of the biggest two. There's others, but that's kind of the general high look right now is Aurelion Sol at the top, then some pretty good 4-cost metas, things like that. Then go from there. So again, high level. I can't go into every comp in these reports, but that's kind of it. One thing I did want to talk about that I think should probably be a focus for next patch is 3 costs. Right now, we are seeing 1 costs have their place, whether that be Sona or Viego Hero. There's a couple there that are doing okay. We're seeing some 2 costs do well, Echo and Yasuo, for example. Once Aurelion Sol's out of the way, they suffer because they can't do well into Aurelion Sol, but they're in a decent spot. We're seeing Orianna do well. There's even some Bard variants, although Bard could actually use a little love as well. And then obviously 4 costs are doing well. Kaisa, Yunara, as we said, Lux, things like that. Really, it feels like 3 costs right now are kind of the space that not a lot of people are investing in. This would be champions like Draven, LeBlanc, Ahri, Jinx, Gwen, Mal, Zoe. I think if you look at the list, none of them are particularly like way off or anything. But right now, it's just too risky to try to re-roll for 3 costs. I think Jinx is a great example where like I've had games where you can win with Jinx 2. Jinx 2 does her job, but why would you ever stop and roll for Jinx 3? So many of these, there's just not really a reason to play the 3-star. I think that is something we're going to have to address. There are a couple that have found success, things like Gangplank, Vayne, and Milio, but these are kind of off the backs of other confounding factors. Milio off of obviously Ishtal cashouts, Gangplank off the ability to sort of force him with Bilgewater, things like that, and Vayne obviously having the power of like Galio and Demacia being really strong. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at with champs and traits. But like I said, am confirming there is a B patch. By the time you see this, you'll see this Monday morning, so hopefully you should have that B patch at the end of the day is the hope, but not 100% yet. All right, Portable Forge, as always, we report this. Nothing really has changed here. It's currently below 4.4. It did go up a little this patch, but not enough to really write home about. It's generally still the same, good at 2.1, little less good at 4.2. It does have a lower win rate at the moment. Right now, we see the win rate dropped to around 10%. Generally, we want this to be around 12%, give or take. But obviously, this is a big part of it. It's just the fact that Asol is in the meta. He is eating up a large share of the win percent. So we'll see what happens after the B patch. It does perform slightly worse at higher elos as well. That could be a lot of things going on right now. Basically, all this is to say that any buffs we did would have to be targeted and small. They couldn't be, really big swingy buffs because it's not that far off or anything. All right, overperforming augments. On the top 1% of players, things are looking pretty solid. Golden Egg, still where it should be. Jarvan Shyvana duo. We did nerf this one this last patch, but I do want to talk about this one. We were talking about this on the team, and one of the things is actually this augment might be an example where it ends up staying kind of in this position. It reminds us a lot of back when you could get 4-2 emblem augments. And the 4-2 emblem augments always looked insane in the data. And the reason they looked insane was because if you were in a spot to take this, you're in a good spot, right? And so in the case of the Jarvan Shyvana duo, if you're in a spot where you're already in vertical Demacia and it's a good augment fit for you, well, guess what? It's probably good, and vertical Demacia is good and powers that. Now, I think there's some design debate about should an augment exist that at 4.2 just amps up a certain line? Probably not, but for now, as long as it exists, I think it's actually going to end up here, and I'm not sure that we can nerf it much more that would have a dramatic impact here. So Bandle Bounty continues to be another one that if you're in the right spot for it, it's just insane. Evolve and Overcome, the Kai'Sa buffs have certainly helped this. I think Void is kind of right below, like I said, it's Asol, and then it's the Kai'Sa, Yunara, Demacia kind of lines, and so Kai'Sa being one of those big lines, she's a big, component of this. It helps you force that pretty quickly. Expected Unexpectedness, always good. Cosmic Calling, turns out when you can force, one of the best champs in the game, it's a pretty good augment. Early Learning has actually risen up in the top 1%, so it kind of shows, as much as I've been touting that Sona is the line for one costs, the fact that Early Learning amplifies her so much might be a problem. Hopefully we can get some other one cost to be there, and it might, who knows, maybe Sona healing has to go down ever so slightly. The last interesting one here to talk about is Glass Cannon. Pretty surprised to see this one rise up. This might just be, turns out on Aurelion Soul, Glass Cannon is really good. Could be lack of backline, things like that. Lack of backline assassins. With Fizz out of the way, Glass Cannon looks really good. But interesting to see that one performing well right now. I'll be curious post-Asol nerfs if this is still true. My guess is no, but we'll see. Bottom 90% of players, nothing too major. I do want to call out Red to me is whew, these look pretty insane. So if you're in lower elo, Silco's Revenge and Jarvan Shyvana continue to be really good top 4 augments. Silco's Revenge, I think, is the more interesting one. I talked about it last meta report, but it doesn't have a great win rate. But if you want a top 4 and you're low elo, you should consider taking this and play around Zaun. It's really good. Cosmic Calling, Demacia Forever, Viego Hero Augment, Expected Unexpectedness, all these things. I think the only other interesting thing here is Zehen has finally started to perform pretty well, and Going Long, despite the revert nerf, is actually still doing well in lower elos. On the underperforming side, not a lot of shifts here, actually. Dumbify, Double Trouble, Wild Growth, despite getting a buff, didn't really move. Trifecta 1 and 2, I just talked about 3 costs. The fact that 3 costs aren't really aligned right now. It's not like this augment is understated or anything. Chaos Magic, Golemify, Rumble Hero Augment. Ishtal, we've always talked about this one. This is where it's going to be. We are not buffing Ishtal Expeditionist. This is where it's supposed to be. I think kind of the disappointments for me here is Aura Farming got a pretty big buff, but it didn't really move the needle much. Aura Farming still kind of stinks, which is really unfortunate. So I'd love to see if we can find a way to get this one playable. Secrets of the Sand being the other one. I'm pretty surprised to see this drop off quite as hard as it did. So that's pretty disappointing. So hopefully we can do something there. Hopefully it's meta related. But seeing Secrets of the Sand this low is really kind of unfortunate. So, and then Recombobulator and Flexible. Flexible being this low when emblems are good is also not a great sign. So hopefully next patch we can get some of those. And then bottom 90%, this is about what you'd expect. Ishtal Expeditionist, Dumbify, Cooking Pot, Win Out, Alawi Hero Augment, Recombobulator, Trait Tree, Flexible, and Treasure Hunt. So Trait Tree being bottom 90% right now shows kind of the difficulty of playing around those emblems. And then finally, known bugs. Pretty much all the same ones that we haven't been able to fix. The only new one here is that we did fix an issue with Darius's execute, but then we found a different issue. So there is I believe what we've seen now is if he goes to execute and the target dies while he's trying to execute, it can put him in a weird state where he's not stuck forever, but he like loses a second or two. Either way, there's some work to do around Darius still, so he's definitely not quite there. But otherwise, these are all the same kind of bugs that we've seen. So there you go. That is your Monday morning meta report. Again, as I said, there will probably be a B patch sometime in the next 24 hours. They'll be hitting a couple things, so look forward to that. I won't do a rundown for that. I'll be kind of busy working in the office, but you'll see the notes posted. If it really should be simple though. So cool. All right, that's gonna do it for me. Until next time, take it easy.